Good afternoon, everybody. Today is Monday, May 5th. It is 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Admissions Live. I'm your host, Chris Dorso, and today on the show I'll be speaking with Lloyd Thacker. Lloyd is the Executive Director of the Education Conservancy. We will talk a little bit about how we can make the whole admissions process make a little more sense and make it better. I'm very much looking forward to this discussion today. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network. It's a series of professional web development shows, professional development web shows and podcasts, always free and accessible to you in our archives at higheredlive.com as well as on iTunes. You can be a part of our broadcast by tuning in live now and sharing your insights and questions using the Higher Ed Live hashtag on Twitter. You can receive weekly updates with live show dates and times by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. Today's show would not be possible without the support of all of my colleagues here at Stony Brook University, as well as all of our friends at M. Stoner. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner. It's a marketing communications firm that works with educational institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. They've got a free webinar coming up Wednesday, May 14th, titled Admit or Die. It seems a little extreme, I'll be honest. Addressing admissions decision factors on higher education websites. Is your website communicating the vital information for decision making, and are you following usability practices that will lead to conversions? And we will get a link out with that so you can register for that program. Do you know if students are leaving your college visit with inspiration and not just information? A Welcome to College visit audit will reveal what your visitors are hearing and what they should be hearing. Contact Justin Bayer via Twitter at welcome2college, welcome2college, or you can email Justin, Justin, at welcometocollege.com for more information. And after joining the Chegg family nearly 3 years ago, the Zinch team is becoming Chegg Enrollment Solutions. Find out what this exciting change means for your ability to recruit students on their U.S. and on their international platforms by emailing clientssuccess@chegg.com today, Chegg, C-H-E-G-G. And we will pop out a couple of links so you've got all of those things for you there. All right, so with that, our guest today is Lloyd Thacker. Lloyd is the founder and the director of the Education Conservancy, which is a nonprofit organization committed to reforming college admissions in the public interest. Lloyd edited College Unranked, book plug. His advocacy has included research, convening national conversations among key stakeholders, developing resources, appearing on major news programs, writing, public speaking, and Lloyd Thacker, background on my side. So as a relatively young higher education professional, I went to the New England ACAC conference summer of 2005, which Lloyd Thacker keynoted. The book was relatively new at that time, and Lloyd completely blew my mind as to all of the things that admissions could be. And keep in mind, folks, this is almost 10 years ago. All the things that we could be doing better, and sort of as a young idealistic, new to the profession admissions guy, new to an admissions director title where I had real responsibility and real decision-making capability. And so this book, if you have not picked this up yet, I can't push College Unranked enough. It's an incredible book. And also on my bulletin board behind me is right off the Education Conservancy's website, which formed the title of the episode today, We Admit, Guidance from Those Who Do. It's a two-page summary offered from some of the top admissions folks in the business about how we really can do what we do better and how important that really is. So with that, I would like to bring into the discussion our guest, if I can unmute him properly. I muted him and then he's stuck. Lloyd, can you unmute yourself? Let's see. I muted him and then he's stuck. I swear he's there. There he is. Hey, there he is. All right, fantastic. So welcome to our guest this afternoon, Lloyd Thacker. Welcome, Lloyd.
All right, nice to be with you. Thanks, Chris.
So talk a little bit about the Education Conservancy and what it is that you guys do.
Well, I often describe the Education Conservancy as an experiment in providing a stage for concerns to gather and leadership to emerge, and trying to align admission practices with the values espoused by admission folks, universities.
I unmuted myself. There we go. So much technology. So, so how and why did this happen? How did the Education Conservancy come about?
Well, I mean, I've been involved in college admissions and college admissions counseling for many years, 40 years probably. And during the first 30, I watched as the commercialization of college admissions was distorting students' relationships with learning in a way that really bothered me. And I began to speak about it and think about it and listen to deans and presidents complain about it during cocktail conversations. And people said, oh, you should write a book. And I said, well, if I write a book, nobody will read it. But what if we tried to pull together the voices of thoughtful people out there in the profession and try to deliver a collective conscience, a kind of a countervailing force to the commercialization of college admissions. And so I thought about the title of a book called College Unranked, and I said, well, what if we collected some essays? So I put together an abstract of a book sitting there at my desk as a high school guidance counselor, college counselor at a high school, and the first paragraph, first line of the abstract went something like this: the commercialization of college admissions led by U.S. News and World Report rankings has created a crisis by undermining educational values. Will you, Mr. President, Mr. or Mrs. Dean, at such and such highly ranked college, submit an essay to a book that's trying to, push back against this? Did a spell check 3 or 4 times, push send, and sent it to 12 deans and presidents. Within 3 days, 10 of the 12 said yes. Well, within a week, I was interviewed by Jock Steinberg for the New York Times about something else. He mentioned the book in the last line. Publishers and agents contacted me. They all wanted to, interested in the book, but they wanted to use it to carve the essays and put them in, make them into an appetizing kind of how to beat the system book again, another how-to book. And while I was excited, I didn't want to, betray the loyalties and the interests of these thoughtful educators, because this was not another how-to book. This was, I envisioned, as a how-not-to book, and that is how not to let the system get the best of our kids. And so I had to self-publish the book in order to get it out there. And to self-publish, I had to quit my job and start the Education Conservancy as a nonprofit organization. We ended up selling 5,000 books within the first year, out of the back of my car, kind of a thing. Now I went around and gave talks, and the Education Conservancy then began to serve the interest generated by the book, and Harvard Press came along and republished the book, and it's now sold total about 14,000 copies. I'll stop there because I don't want to give you the whole history. You might want to selectively pick what you want me to talk about.
Yeah, there you go. So we were talking before we went live here about sort of the market metaphor.
Right.
I mean, obviously you can't do higher ed without money, and we get that. How did that take over everything? When did we lose the admissions? I mean, maybe it's just too idealistic to think about the ideals of what higher education should be, but how do we fall victim to the rankings and to everything that entails?
Well, I mean, I'm no expert in the history of higher ed. I just knew that what was going on didn't sit right with my own educational sensibilities, and I saw that it was bothering many other people. But I roughly understand that in the early '80s, several forces conspired to encourage colleges to embrace the market metaphor. So there never used to be such a thing as enrollment management. It used to be that financial aid and admissions were two separately, separate operations in a college. But as you had a threat of demographic shifts, fewer kids, you had less money coming in from the federal government. You had the rankings that were beginning, and one thing led to another. So, and they fed off each other. They fueled each other, and so we now have $4 billion industries that didn't exist, 35 years ago. We have the consultants for colleges industry, the consultants for kids industry, the test prep industry, and the how to beat the system guidebook industry, and more and more and more. And it's really troubling a lot of people that what we understand the purpose of college to be, and the way college admissions is being run. These things are becoming further and further apart.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I had a long discussion. I remember, again, being a young counselor, because I was next to a college rep standing behind a table it was a health science school, not a school with a health science program, but a health science school. And students were walking up to the table and asking about things like English majors and whatnot. And no matter what the student asked about, the counselor found a way to spin it as, oh, this is the perfect school for you. And I'm like, you're a health science school. You don't have an English program. And they said, well, we were told by our dean, we just got to get these students in, and it doesn't matter, what their interests are, and it stunned me, as because for me, again, being young and idealistic, if my school isn't the best fit for what you want to do with the rest of your life, well, then I'm not going to encourage you to go to my school. I mean, there's 4,500 colleges and universities across the country. There's more than one place for everybody. The great challenge of higher ed, balancing that marketing.
Right. I mean, we've been around 10 years, and we is mostly me. I had an assistant for about 4 or 5 years, and I don't anymore. We've got some interesting projects going on, which we should probably talk about in not too much detail. But we've done research to support kind of what our hunches were when we got started, and college admissions has grown way beyond its intended purpose. I mean, and it's having an impact way beyond that. And it's supposed to be an operation that matches kids with educational opportunities to maximize educational return, right? One could say that. But it not only allocates opportunity now, but it allocates educational value. It tells us, what education is about. So when we research kids who have gone through this process as a transformative process, they say things like, and we ask, what are you learning as you go through this process? It's not good stuff. It's not the kinds of things that we as educators would want them to learn. They're learning to cheat. They're learning that cheating's okay. They're saying things like, this process has nothing to do with what they tell me education is about. They say things like, this process has me doing things that are completely contrary to my values. They're saying things like, if I don't get into a top-ranked college, I'll have to go to a public university. I'll be stupid. It's the collective impact of the signals that all these agencies are sending to kids is really violating their relationship with learning, and we see it playing out. So and here's something that should surprise all of us and really shame us. In this particular research, and it's just one piece of research, we asked the kids. Oh no, this was in another piece of research called Information Matters, and it was a study funded by the Lumina Foundation. We looked at how are students being served with the current sources of information that are available to them when they make a decision about where to go to college. And it's a great study. All these things are free. The results, the research reports are free on our website. Everything's free except the book. Of all the sources of information that students look at, the source that they trust the least, the colleges themselves and the reps from the colleges.
But we're so trustworthy. But we're such nice people. We're so trustworthy. It's where we are.
Well, it shows that we're treating admissions as marketing rather than as education. You know, college admissions, when looked at as education, as it can exemplify the best that colleges have to offer rather than the worst. And right now, it's kind of at the worst. You know, I read that email that we got from that parent this morning, right?
That's right. Yeah.
You know, so I get an email this morning from a parent saying, you know, this process is crazy. Can I help? I'm a data research kind of person, and I'll volunteer my services. So she sends me her resume, and this woman, you know, has credentials, you know, a bachelor's from the H school and a PhD in research psychology from the S school. You know, it's amazing how deeply revolting this whole process has become for very thoughtful people, you know. Anyway, the other research. Go ahead.
You know, I think that's, you know, speaking of you know, it's good. That's why one of the things that I really liked about the College Unranked book was that this wasn't you know, a bunch of you know, low-level low-level college folks saying, "Oh, it's not fair. The big schools are damaging what we're trying to do. We're trying to show that, you know, little tiny public school X is just as good as an Ivy League program or whatever." But there's Ivy League deans and presidents in here saying the system is broken.
Yeah, and the reason why I went after those was frankly to try to market the book, right?
Well, true, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I can say that I can say a lot of things, but I want to say the most meaningful things. I was telling you the story of a guy I know who has been a friend of the Education Conservancy and an admissions professional for 30 years. He knew me when I was just idealistic, and now I'm idealistic and scarred. But he was just hired at a liberal arts college as the vice president for enrollment and communications for the school, and this is his first year. He's just been through one cycle, and when the rankings came out from the colleges, all the media folks were ready to publish the rankings, and he said, "No, we're not doing that. You know, we're not. We're going to do admissions like as education, okay?" And of course, he was taking a big risk, and so they didn't publish the rankings, and they fired this firm that's famous for widening the funnel at the top, and they had been paying this firm, $500,000 a year, and he said, "This is outrageous. We can do this, and we can do this as education." Well, I just found out on May 1st that he's not only ahead, but he has better quality kids, and many stories of how kids are telling him that they, in so many words, they enjoy being treated as students and not as customers. So there are people, and this is just one story, there are people who are trusting their own educational instincts, their own educational expertise, and taking charge of being educators in the process. And if not educational institutions being able to speak the language and act the behavior of educators, who can, right?
Yeah.
And why should we expect more from our kids than we do from ourselves in this process?
That's a very valid point. You know what, though? I want to follow up on something you mentioned. So you mentioned that this professional you're talking about is the in charge of enrollment and communications at this particular school. Right. Where do you? I mean, I know that I've had colleagues at different schools who've been at Stony Brook. We've been part of, I feel like a half dozen different divisions in the 10 years I've been here. Right. Where should enrollment folks be? Are we student affairs? Are we marketing? Because I mean, I don't see myself as a marketing person. Well, obviously, marketing.
I'm going to give you an answer that may sound flippant. You are but it's dead serious, and you are the premier educators of your institution. You are looking at this process as educational, right? In other words, you are helping kids understand whether it's important, how important it is to choose a college, how to go about it, and how to finance it. And let me tell you that this is being understood by not only admissions folks, but presidents. So right now I'm involved in a research project, and I'm interviewing college presidents. College presidents talk with me. It's amazing. I can send an email and say, I'm doing a research project. And I'm interviewing presidents, and I mean presidents from a whole range of colleges, right? From least selective to the most selective. And I've interviewed 19. I'm going to be talking with my last one coming up. And so the research is funded by the Spencer Foundation, and it's called we're presidential thinking, understanding the thinking. Let's see. It's financial aid policy, understanding the thinking behind the decision making. So we're talking to college presidents and understanding what's their mental calculus when they decide how they're going to allocate these finite resources. Are they doing it in line with their values? Could they do it better? What would it take for them to do it better? And it's been fascinating. And so there are college presidents we're talking with that want to shrink their discount rates and tell us why. And they tell us why. Presidents that are expanding their discount rates, and they want to tell us why. All think they could do a better job of using aid to meet the needs of students. And most of them say it's shameful how the process has gotten and that they're partially responsible for it, right? So you get this. So there's one college president that says, we're treating this in so many words as education. And we're being successful as a result of it. And we've reduced our discount rate. We're going to talk up front about costs. We're going to talk up front about price and the relationship between the two. And we're going to talk up front to kids about what questions they should be asking. I mean, it's like the we admit kind of sheet, only she's employing it across her whole. So admissions is becoming education in her shop. Long answer to a short question.
Which ultimately is what it should be, I suppose, and really what it's all about.
Well, I suspect you got into this profession because you believed in education.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, and I think, and we had a discussion. I was part of a group that was invited down to NACAC headquarters 2 summers ago to talk about being a young professional in this field, and the fact that this field really is a field, and it's not necessarily, well, it's marketing or it's sales or it's counseling or whatever it is, but it's a thing, and it's a really viable, fantastic career path. And I use this story myself all the time. That something my wife told me many years ago. She said, "You forget, Chris. Students leave your office and go out to dinner. Getting into college is a big deal, and it should be a big deal. And it's easy to forget that. When you're looking at standing behind a table in the gym for 8 weeks in a row, and then you're living under a pile of applications, and you're dealing with all the external pressures that come into it. To remember the educational mission of what it is that we do, that we really are changing people's lives and giving them the opportunity to do better things for themselves."
Yeah. Admissions.
Good.
College admissions, profession or industry? I once led a session entitled that, and there were a lot of people at that session, and the admissions folks that were on the panel were luminaries, some of whom are no longer with us. But the whole idea was to invite us to think about the differences between profession and industry, and that we're moving away from the idea of a profession. A profession is something that's bound by a common set of values and beliefs that are beyond just expanding the bottom line. And I want to believe that most of us are in this profession because we believe in those common values. But then when we look at the forces that are controlling it, they are market forces, and they've carried us way beyond where we would go if we were the ones deciding where we want it to go, and we can reclaim that. We can reassert educational jurisdiction in what has become the marketplace of college admissions. And if we don't, education is going to continue to suffer. You know, we talked about the commercialization of college admissions very briefly over the past 35, 40 years. And the question is education writ large any better as a result? And the answer is categorically no. All the evidence that I've seen has shown that we are suffering. Access is suffering, affordability is suffering, honesty, integrity, learning, they're all suffering, and they can be tied to many of the practices that are happening. When we look at college admissions as an industry.
So how do I mean, it's obvious for somebody at a president or a vice presidential level to be able to make these wholesale changes and say, okay, we're going to do things different at my school. How does a young professional so you don't lose that idea? Like I said, I mean, when I got into this field 15 years ago, I had that idealistic. How do you do that as a young professional to say, my RVP needs number X of applications, of admits, of whatever. And so how do I justify that as a young professional?
Well, when we get off here, you call me and you ask me to talk with the person who is, as a veteran professional, transforming his institution. Or you ask me for other leads, okay? But it's fascinating because last week I've been talking with 2 or 3 young professionals young people who want to get into the profession, and they found the literature on their website, and they've been talking with me. And this last question was from a guy who said to me on the phone, how do I find an admissions office that's ethical? So there are people who are really, really, really interested in this, so for the right reasons, and they've suffered through a process that they would like to change. So how do we do a better job? First of all, we have to believe that we can and we should. Education. You said in the introduction, you talked about how we could be this. Well, we not only can be, but we should be. Education, in many ways, is the business of should be. I was talking with Howard Gardner. And once, who's become a friend of the Education Conservancy. I was having breakfast with him, and I said, Howard, education is the business of hope. And he stopped mid-chew of his granola, and he turned his head, and he ruminated, and he looked back at me, and he said, education is the crucible of hope. So we cannot allow, we have to keep that as our rudder, right? You use this rudder metaphor. We have to understand that our individual actions collectively impact students out there, and they are experiencing college admissions as something, as a commercial transaction rather than an educational interactive kind of process, which is distorting their relationship with learning and hurting education in America. Not to mention the amount of money that's being transferred from meeting the needs of students to serving institutional self-interest at the cost of access and diversity. So it's keeping our eye on the ball, or should I say, keeping our heart in the process and realizing we are at our best when we're doing what we believe. And institutions can begin to then act courageously and creatively to raise the bar for all. When I'm talking with these presidents, they all say they want to, and some of them have ideas about what they can do, and it's going to be interesting what I'm going to find when I go back and read through all the interviews and write up the report. But there will be some suggestions as a result of it. So, saying that there's nothing that I can do and that I want to do it is not enough. We are educators, and at our best, we are educators, and we have to use educational values to judge our actions, just like the values that were on the We Admit sheet that you have behind you. The deans of admissions came together, and they read all these essays, and a well-known dean said, "Lloyd, they're all about values." And I said, "All right, what are the values?" And we identified those 8 values that the 15 or 20 essays discussed. And then 8 deans came to Portland on their own dime to read through the essays to identify these values. 2 years later, a year later, 30 deans of admission came to Portland on their own dime, and we developed advice, guidance based on those values for students and for parents. And that sheet's being used all across the country by not only admissions offices but by counselors. Now we need a similar list of actions, recommendations for deans and presidents, I guess. And that may come as a result, you know, I'm thinking about it when I read, after I do this research, see what the presidents are going to say. But it's something that I'm thinking about. But I want to believe that presidents and deans are sharp enough and courageous enough to figure this out and to realize that, you know, if we were going to be salespeople, we would be in an industry, not in a profession.
That's a very, very good point. And I've always said, you know, you want to be that person who makes that impact. You know, be a leader, not a follower, kind of a thing. You know, be that school that goes out and makes a real significant change, and you will see that come back. Yeah.
No.
All right. I mean, so
go ahead.
Good. We're running short on time, so I just want to get any sort of final thoughts on any recommendations that you would have.
Well, there's a real opportunity for educational leadership in college admissions, and those schools that are courageous enough to say, we're going to treat college admissions as education. In fact, we're going to evaluate how we do admissions according to our highest educational criteria. Those schools and rally the inspiration and imagination of their staff to accomplish this. Those schools are going to be the real trendsetters. Those schools are going to be the real leaders, and there's tremendous opportunity out there to do that.
All right, fantastic. Well, I appreciate Lloyd. Thank you very much for coming on with us this afternoon or morning, I suppose, out on the West Coast. And I have tweeted out a couple of links to both the Education Conservancy as well as the PDF that hangs on the wall behind me. No, it doesn't. It hangs right here. It will hang back on the wall behind me.
It hangs.
Yeah. I can see it, not back there. That's my other article that I got from the NACAC Journal. So Admissions Live will be back live again in 2 weeks with my co-host Nicole Lentini. Thanks as always to our program sponsors, M. Stoner and Zinch, Chegg, and Welcome to College. Coming up next on Higher Ed Live, next Tuesday, not tomorrow, next Tuesday at 1 p.m. If you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance even less. Disintermediation and higher ed advancement. Andrew Gossin will talk about how advancement offices can stay relevant in an age of always-on, user-centric networks. Alumni connections, in some cases, stronger than ever before. And how involved are you in those connections? Get reminders about this and other great shows by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. And, of course, browse the archives on higheredlive.com, or you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Thanks again for watching. I'm Chris Dorso, back next month with more Admissions Live.